In the frozen silence of a Russian winter, a kingdom gasped its final breath. A dynasty that had ruled for more than 300 years was about to vanish. The Romanovs, being the last imperial family of Russia, were destined for a fate that was darker than any other royal house. But as history buried their names in blood and snow, whispers began to rise. Whispers of survival, of hidden heirs, of a bloodline that refused to die. This is the untold story of the lost heirs of the Romanovs, a tale of betrayal, exile, and secrets that will echo over the centuries. For over a century, legends have persisted that one, or more, of the royal children escaped. Could it be true? Could the blood of the Tsars still flow, quietly, hidden among us? To understand their end, we must first understand their empire. The rule of the House of Romanov started in 1613. From a small boyar family, they rose to command one of the largest empires the world had ever seen, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean. The Romanovs ruled with divine certainty for centuries. The Tsar was not just a monarch. He was God's chosen ruler. And yet, beneath the glittering chandeliers of St. Petersburg, the seeds of their downfall had already been sown. The world was changing industry, revolution, and the cry of common people echoed louder each year. But the royal family remained insulated, bound by ancient rituals, unaware that history's tide was turning against them. In 1894, a young and very religious man ascended the throne, Tsar Nicholas II. To many, he seemed gentle and devoted, a loving husband, a loyal father. But as a ruler, he was unprepared. It was an empire that was collapsing amidst social unrest, famine, and inequality, and Nicholas clung to the illusion of divine right. His wife, Empress Alexandra, carried her own burdens, a German princess in the heart of Russia, often distrusted by her own people. They had 4 daughters whom they cherished, Olga, Tatiana Maria, and Anastasia, and their only son, Alexei, the Tsarevich, heir to the throne, was their greatest joy and their greatest curse. For Alexei suffered from hemophilia, a disease which can make a simple bruise fatal, but his illness was kept secret, hidden from the world, and that secrecy would soon open the door to a man who would seal their fate. His name was Grigory Rasputin, a wandering mystic, healer, and some would say a manipulator. He came to the royal court as a savior for the young prince. To Alexander, he was sent by God. To Nicholas, he was a man of miracles. But for the nobles and the people, well, Rasputin was the devil himself. His influence over the royal family grew stronger, and the more they trusted him, the more the empire despised them. Whispers of scandal, corruption, and witchcraft spread like wildfire through St. Petersburg. Then, the royal image began to crack, and by the time the First World War erupted, the cracks were fractures that could not be mended. In 1917, after centuries of autocratic rule, the unthinkable occurred. The Russian Revolution swept through the empire. Soldiers mutinied, people rose, and streets burnt with the fire of change. Nicholas was forced to abdicate the throne, ending more than 300 years of Romanov power. The once mighty Tsar was now a prisoner of his own people. He and his family were shifted from palace to palace, constantly watched and divested of all titles and dignity. Yet, even then, they believed they might one day return. They prayed for mercy, but mercy would not come. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, deep in the basement of a merchant-esque house in Yik, the last Romanovs were told they would be moved again for their safety. Still, there would not be a journey. No safety, no sunrise. A firing squad entered the room. The Tsar, his wife, their children, and loyal servants all stood silently, confused. A few seconds later, the order was given. Gunfire shattered the night. The Romanov dynasty ended in that basement, amidst blood and silence. But even as the walls absorbed their final cries, history refused to rest. Rumors started to circulate almost immediately that one or more of the royal children had survived. Some claimed the bodies were never all found. Others whispered that loyal soldiers had spirited them away in secret, hidden by the church or smuggled across borders into Europe. Of these legends, the most famous was a young woman who called herself Anastasia, and her story would ignite a mystery that would haunt the world for nearly a century. Was she really the lost princess of Russia, or just some desperate imposter chasing a dream? Truth and myth were inseparable in the tumult of revolution, but one thing was for certain: the Romanov bloodline refused to die quietly. In the next chapter, we follow the trail of Anastasia, the imposters, the investigators, and the shocking discoveries that changed royal history forever. They said all the Romanovs were gone, that none could have lived through that night of terror. But from the ashes of the empire, a voice began to whisper, a voice that allegedly belonged to one of the daughters of the Tsar. Her name was Anastasia. Initially, nobody thought that would be possible, and yet, the hope of a surviving princess was too potent to discard. The story began to take on a life of its own, a myth of rebirth in the ruins of revolution. In 1920, a young woman was pulled from a freezing canal in Berlin. She would not give her name. She would not speak of her past. She had lain 4 months in silence, trapped between life and death. Then one day she whispered a single word: Anastasia. Doctors, nurses, even strangers were drawn to her. Her face carried the shadow of the lost duchess, her mannerisms, her gestures uncannily familiar to those who had known the Romanovs. When she finally began to speak, her knowledge of palace life, of secret details only a true royal might know, sent shivers through Europe. She called herself Anna Anderson, and she swore she was the last surviving daughter of the Tsar. Headlines exploded in newspapers across the world: the princess lives, the miracle of the Romanovs. It was a story of hope to a generation haunted by war and loss. Behind the fascination, however, came doubt. Members of the Romanov family dismissed her. This woman is an impostor, pronounced the Grand Duchess Olga, sister of the Tsar. Others, however, were not so sure. Some loyal servants recognized her scars, her eyes, her voice. The mystery thickened. For years, Anna Anderson fought to prove her identity. She lived in exile, in asylums, in borrowed rooms, pursued by journalists and skeptics. Each interview, each photo, each appearance in court drew more attention. Was she really Anastasia Romanov, the lost heir of Russia, or a fragile soul, broken by trauma, stuck in a dream that was not hers? Later, other claimants showed up. Men claiming to be Alexei, women claiming to be Maria or Tatiana. Each story followed the same pattern: a miraculous escape, a hidden journey across Europe, a life lived in secrecy. The world wanted to believe, and so impostors found an audience. But the truth remained buried with the bodice in Siberian soil. For decades, historians searched for proof. In 1979, a group of amateur archaeologists discovered bones charred, scattered, unmarked, hidden in the Ural forest near Yuk. The find was suppressed by the Soviet government, afraid of what it might reveal. The mystery endured until the fall of the Iron Curtain. In 1991, the grave was opened again. 9 bodies were recovered. DNA analysis confirmed what many had feared. Tsar Nicholas II, Empress Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters lay there. But 2 bodies were missing. One daughter and Alexei, the young heir. Anastasia? It also fired up old hopes. Supporters of Anna Anderson declared vindication. And yet, science had one more revelation to deliver. In the early 2000s, new remains were found nearby, 2 small skeletons, burned and buried apart from the rest. Modern DNA testing left no doubt they were Alexei and his missing sister. It was indeed the end of the Anastasia Romanov legend. Anna Anderson was not the princess. Following her death, her DNA was matched with a Polish factory worker named Franciszka, a woman who had been traumatized, who had lost her family, and who sought refuge in a fantasy which the world was all too ready to embrace. Yet even in the face of truth, the myth refused to die. Because Anastasia had become more than a person, she was a symbol, a dream of survival in an age of destruction, a fairy tale born from tragedy. Gone were the Romanovs, but their story lived on through cinema, through art, through the eternal question, what if one of them escaped? And while the bones of this family now rest in the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, their ghosts persist in the corridors of history, for even science cannot silence the imagination. The world thought the mystery was over. The graves had been found. DNA corroborated this. The Romanovs, it seemed, were indeed gone. But even as science closed one door, another quietly opened. For the Romanov bloodline did not die in that basement in Yekaterinburg. Far from it, their relatives, cousins, nephews, and distant heirs were already scattered across Europe long before the revolution broke out. Some fled to France, others to Britain, a few to America. They changed their names, married into other families, and faded into the world of common life. And yet, their ancestry still whispered through their veins. The surviving branches of the Imperial family lived in quiet exile in the years following the revolution. Among them were the descendants of Grand Duke Kirill Vladimirovich, the Tsar's cousin. Kirill had escaped Russia in 1917, declaring himself the rightful heir after Nicholas's death. Exiled first in Finland and then in France, he tried to keep the monarchy going as an idea. His son, Grand Duke Vladimir, carried that dream into the 20th century, keeping the flame of Imperial Russia flickering, even as the Soviet Union stood in its shadow. And from Vladimir came Maria Vladimirovna, who today claims to be the rightful heir to the Russian throne. She was born in exile, raised among echoes of lost power, and remains the symbolic head of what some still call the Imperial House of Russia. To her supporters, she represents continuity, a living link to the Romanovs. To her critics, she is the relic of a world long gone. But either way, she is the proof that the bloodline did not disappear completely. Far from the palaces and crowns, other Romanov descendants live ordinary lives, scattered pieces of one great dynasty that once ruled a sixth of the earth in New York, in London, in Paris. Some work as teachers, artists, and historians. Some do not speak of their ancestry whatsoever. For them, the Romanov name is not a crown, but a burden, a shadow that follows every generation. And yet, there are still gatherings, quiet dinners in private halls, where cousins who share royal blood meet to remember what was lost. Photographs of Nicholas II hang beside modern portraits, as if time itself has not truly moved on. In Russia, the Romanov story has taken on a new life. To some, the family has become holy martyrs, symbols of faith and endurance under tyranny. Churches have been built on the sites of their deaths. Pilgrimages are made to their graves. Every July, thousands gather to commemorate the Tsar and his family by walking the same road that once led them to their execution. But to many others, the Romanovs represent a painful, divided past of affluence and suffering, of power and oppression. The dynasty is tragedy and warning alike to them. Yet no matter from which vantage, the fascination remains. The faces of the last Tsar and his children still appear in books, films, and dreams. Their story continues to haunt the world because it asks questions that never die. How far will power go to preserve itself? And can bloodlines really disappear? Or do they find ways to survive in silence? 100 years after the fall of the Romanov, the palaces are ruined, the empire is long since gone, and the red banners of revolution have long since faded into history. But the echoes remain. Every few years, new rumors surface. A secret heir was hidden in Argentina, a lost diary found in Siberia, a forgotten letter claiming the Tsarevich escaped. And each time the world listens once again, because people do not simply love history. They love hope, the hope that maybe, just maybe, something beautiful survived the fire. Today, the descendants of the Romanovs do not claim a throne. Their kingdom now exists in memory, in archives, in stories told from one generation to another. They are a family scattered by history, united by legend. Their power is gone, but the name has become immortal. From the icy nights of Siberia to the gilded halls of Europe, the Romanov bloodline still flows quiet, unseen, but unbroken. And perhaps that is the greatest secret of all. Time buries kings and empires alike, but some names refuse to fade. But the Romanovs live on so long as their story is remembered by the world. Their reign is over, Their dynasty has fallen, and yet their legacy, their tragedy, is eternal. The last Tsar. The lost children, the hidden heirs. All bound together by the one thing that outlives us all: blood.